Guys, and welcome back, and today I have got you my first elite codices unlock in Battlefield 1, and it is the Madsen MG. I know it's a little bit of a bizarre choice. I mean, most people have probably gone for the Automatico or the SMLE as their starting out weapons, but there are a few reasons that I have chosen to do the Madsen to start with, and they are, well, I was looking through my combat record or my soldier record in Battlefield 1, and I realised that I'd barely used the Madsen at all during the entire playthrough of this game. So I was like, you know what, it's probably time to give this weapon a college try and see how it actually works out. On top of that, I had this really weird occurrence. Whilst playing Battlefield the other day, I got this really weird thing. I very rarely get them. They're called battle packs. I'm not sure whether you've come across them. You can get given them by random in games. I know we don't sort of often see them, but I did manage to get one. And on top of getting this thing, I also got a legendary skin out of it. I mean, I've had 5 or 6 of them before, and they've always turned out to be these white skins. So getting a gold skin out of this thing was wow. And I thought, well, you know what? I've now got this gold skin. I've barely used this weapon. And looking at the statistics of this weapon, it is boss. That sounds ridiculous. It's got really good stats. The stats are almost identical to that of the bar, with a slightly slower rate of fire of 540 RPM instead of the 600 RPM that the bar has. On top of that, it also has insane hipfire. Looking at the stats of it, it actually has better hipfire stats. Along with the bar, they both have better hipfire stats than the Hellriegel. So the trench version of both of those weapons is very usable. I do, however, choose to use the Storm variant because I like to aim down sights, and I think hitting people at longer ranges, which is what the LMGs are probably more designed for, is what I prefer doing with them. As they have such high muzzle velocity, I'm going to use them to their strengths, and although the hipfire is very good on it, I do feel that you are better suited using this. Now, how does this weapon actually play out? Now, although the statistics for this weapon are great, it has awesome hipfire, as I said, good rate of fire, good muzzle velocity, and it actually has a faster reload than the bar if you still have bullets in the chamber, which is very manageable as you have a 31 round magazine, which makes this weapon very effective. It only therefore is edged out by a few weapons, not only in its category but in the game in general. Very few weapons have this many bullets, so in those respects it's very effective, or would assume to be very effective, though you play with it and the gun seems to bounce around a lot more than the stats would imply that it would, which makes it a little bit more ungamely and very difficult to hit targets at range or on the move. I don't know whether it's partly due to the sights. I know the AA sights aren't particularly the most accurate things because you're only aiming in that circle, though I do find it is almost impossible to use the standard iron sights on it because they're so close to the main body of the gun, and the main body of the gun is so big, it takes up so much more of the screen. With the AA sights on, it pushes the gun down a bit more, so you just get the irons, you just get the AA sights. And I just find that it's much easier to acquire targets with it, especially because that's the one thing I struggle the most with the Madsen is acquiring targets. Purely for the fact when you're running along and then you pull up your weapon. As you pull up the weapon, due to its size and that huge magazine sat at the top of it, you bring the whole thing across your screen. And by doing that, it's very easy to lose track of targets. On top of that, every time you scope in, you also have the magazine come across your screen in the opposite direction. And it's still, even once you've got used to that sort of premise, it still takes up a lot of screen space when you just scope in. As you can notice, it takes up nearly a third of the screen, just the gun on its own. So people can hide in that area quite easily. Well, they're not going to be going, oh, you know what, if I stand here, I'm going to hide behind the magazine of that MG, so he won't be able to see me. But what the premise is that you can lose targets quite easily behind this weapon, which does make it a little bit awkward to use. Now, although these negative aspects are a pain in the arse, they only really affect you at longer ranges. So if you engage this weapon at sort of mid to close range, once you've got used to the sort of look of the weapon, it's very hard to sort of pick out massive problems, and it is so effective at that mid to close range engagement. Due to its higher rate of fire, really good hit fire spread, fairly decent reload speed and good ammo capacity, this weapon can absolutely shred at closer ranges. It's quite similar to the bar in that aspect, just has a few more rounds in the chamber and a slightly slower rate of fire. And it does have that more favourable damage model, although it does have less damage than the bar at range. The bar has the best damage at range, it only drops off to 19 damage, although that doesn't actually make any difference to the amount of bullets it requires to kill. It's still a 6-shot kill at longer ranges, like this one, unlike the Lewis gun and the Hoyt, which I would say were better long-range weapons because they've got better recoil models and they sort of fit that lot of sort of long-range shooting. They actually have a lower damage model and take 7 shots to kill instead of 6 shots to kill at range, which is a bizarre choice. I'm not quite sure why that's been done. But as I said, this weapon is primarily designed for closer ranges, and I do think it's really effective at that. And I was really pleasantly surprised by this weapon. I was really expecting it to be an absolute chore to get these 500 kills. There must be a good reason that I've barely used this weapon, and although it has obviously the aforementioned negative aspects of it, the more I use this weapon, the more I actually started to really enjoy using it. It is effective at its specific ranges. Although that said, I still wouldn't pick this weapon over either the other two ones that would be the top choices. If I want to go with something that's going to be close quarters, I'd still pick the bar, and if I wanted something that's going to be more sort of a more all-round LMG, I'm always going to pick the MG for that 500 round magazine. Nearly said 500 rounds for some reason. That 100 round magazine, which makes it the sort of LMG, and I kind of feel that's where a lot of the LMGs fall down in this game, is they don't really set themselves aside from the SMGs, and that's going to be less so in this upcoming patch with the new SMG that's being brought in by the French army, which is meant to be sort of a more of a long-ranged SMG, which I kind of feel is possibly going to eclipse things like the Lewis gun and the Hoyt. Because those weapons don't have high rate of fire and they've got a very similar damage model to that of an SMG, I kind of feel that these weapons are going to sort of be lost through the employment of this weapon. So it'd be quite interesting to see how they actually play out. But that's completely off topic. We're meant to be talking about the Madsen MG here. And this weapon is really good. And if you haven't given it a go or given it a good college try, so to say, I definitely recommend picking this weapon up and giving it a goose. It is a pretty decent weapon. Now, on top of the 25,000 XP that we get given for the Elite Codices unlock, we also get a mass more information about the weapon, and I really appreciate that from DICE. There's a lot of work gone into that. I have to point out that spawn. What was that? I love the work that's gone into this, and I love reading these things up and learning a little bit more information about all these weapons. I'd never have got to the point of knowing any of this, so I really appreciate being able to sort of have my knowledge expanded by this lovely little thing. Now, this weapon is obviously a Danish-designed weapon, as you can probably guess by the legendary skid being called the Dane. It was first designed in about 1904, 1905, and it first saw service in 1905 in a war between Russia and Japan over the rivalry of Manchuria and Korea. Now, although both the Russians and the Japanese both thought this weapon, the actual details of how many of these weapons were sold are a little bit shaded, because at the time the Danish were a peaceful nation and weren't allowed to sell any weapons to warring nations. The statistics of how many were actually sold are kind of a little bit lost to the history. Though there are some really interesting facts about this weapon. In 1905, there were 4 LMGs that were said to have repelled a Japanese attack. One of these weapons firing nearly 27,000 rounds, and in that time not breaking. And this information sort of filtered through to the rest of the world, and they were like, well, this must be a really good weapon, isn't it? If it can fire that much without breaking, we're going to have to invest in some of these. And the Germans invested in 5,000 of these. And some of these Madsens even saw service in the Battle of the Somme before they started being phased out by some of the weapons that were designed later on in the war. That said, although they were phased out, they were still then distributed between some of the smaller factions of the armed forces within the German army, and a lot of the other nations during the First World War also used this weapon. It was a very popular weapon and it was very effective at the time. Very much like it is in Battlefield 1. It's a very effective weapon, although it's not necessarily the most popular choice. It's definitely worth giving it a go, as I've said. It may be a little bit ungamely, but it is a very good weapon to use. Anyway guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a like. If you're not subscribed, subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye for now. Bye.